I went into Superman terrified. DC as a brand has been left stranded compared to Marvel, stuck both trying to replicate their success whilst keeping what makes DC great at its core. It led to a series of films that were, politely, a disaster. So in comes James Gunn, hot off the Suicide Squad and right before filming Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, to lead DC into a new era, and his hero of choice, the big blue bitch that couldn't bring everything together the first time, Superman. It was obvious. Batman is like Spider-Man, he changes his face every 20 seconds, but when Superman happens, it's important. He's the Man of Steel, he's big blue, he's hope, and that was honestly what James Gunn needed if he was going to pull off a DCU, and a shit ton of it at that. His normal MO wouldn't work for this. He couldn't use insincerity as a crutch for character development or moral ambiguity to create a dynamic internal monologue. Superman has to be sincere and good. There are no tricks. That is the core of who he is as a character, and having seen and mostly enjoyed a lot of James Gunn's films, I didn't think he had it in him. Despite that, James Gunn has delivered one of the most sincere, least morally grey, and most hopeful Superman we've seen on film for years, and he's done so with style, grace, and in one swoop set up a larger universe that I'm more than willing to invest my time into.
Home. Take me home.
I cried. That should be enough the review for anyone with a beating heart and a love of cinema. If you want anything more, then continue, but at this point, you've seen the score, and you've heard the context for why I thought this film would suck ass, but didn't. If you want to stick around for all the opinion and analysis stuff, cool. Otherwise, go and watch this film right now, because it's great. Come back after and get in the comments about how wrong I am in whatever way you like. Now, spoilers. I can't believe he killed Krypto off. Why did you stay here if you haven't seen the film? What did I just say? Go. Be gone. Okay, now for real. This film is a joy to watch. Does it have problems? Yes, of course. It's not Jesus, like some authors might want you to think, but it does exactly what it needs to, when it needs to. I don't want to break the film scene by scene, mainly because it's been a week since I've seen it and I don't want to pirate it to get a copy at home, so I'm just going to stick to a few major aspects. Superman, Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, truth, justice, and the American way. Let's start with Big Blue himself. Of course, any Superman fan knows that Clark Kent is the real interesting character, but it's easier to say Superman. David Corenswet is perfect. No notes. He played the role to perfection, something that was probably very, very hard to do. There wasn't a moment where I was going, this doesn't feel right, like Tyler Hoechlin, Brandon Routh, Henry Cavill, Tom Welling, and Christopher Reeve before him. He embodied the role as Superman and Clark Kent. He shined in the big moments. You could see on his face that earnest optimism, that belief that everyone has that little bit of good in them, and then in the darker points, you could see the struggle, that reality trying to beat him down and remove it, and that will to resist. In particular, I think he shined with Metamorpho and Marley, a point in the film where you can see that resolve in the good in people, and the trust he has in himself to do good being tested. Corenswet lets Superman waver, but he never lets him go over the edge. That resolve, that idea at the core of Superman to do good and give people the space to do good themselves is tested so many times, and Corenswet lets those moments sink in, but never let them overpower him. It's a sign that he and Gunn understand Clark, and it was incredibly satisfying to see on screen. Speaking of being understood, Lois Lane finally gets a good interpretation on the big screen. I've always found most live-action interpretations of Lois to run into the same formula of either being screechy, annoying nuisances, or flat, emotionless workaholics. Rachel Brosnahan can be credited as the first Lois Lane that is a workaholic nuisance, that doesn't resort to screaming or having no emotional range to attempt to show character. She's competent, emotionally complex, and plays a key role in the story where she isn't the damsel in distress. It's strange to say that. I'm surprised they made the female lead a fully rounded and compelling character, but in reality, how many of those do we actually get? The chemistry Brosnahan and Corenswet have together is something else as well. It's nice to see a Clark and Lois that are already together and not worrying about any of that "it's dangerous to be with me," and instead have their main character arc be, can we be together when you fundamentally think everyone is good and I question the motives of everyone? I just think that's neat. Now, the Lex Luthor tier list goes something like this: Clancy Brown, Michael Rosenbaum, every other Lex Luthor, Jesse Eisenberg. Now, we have to add Nick Holt next to Clancy Brown and Michael because he absolutely kills it. There is a fairly famous Dan Harmon rant, not his best one about Now You See Me, his second best one where he gives his Luthor monologue, and I'm 90% sure that James Gunn heard that and uses it as his basis for what Nick Holt would say in his big evil bad monologue at the end of the film. Luthor hates Superman in a way I don't think we've seen outside of Clancy Brown's version from the DCAU ever. This isn't the "you're in the way of my plans" kind of hate. This is the "I made these plans so I have a reason to kill you" kind of hate. There is nothing that Lex won't do in this movie to try and break down, demoralize, weaken, and murder Superman. And throughout all of it, there's this palpable glee and giddiness to it, and I can't wait to fucking see what happens next. I know at some point we're gonna see Holt in Lex's big green power suit, and I cannot fucking wait for that eventual showdown. Brilliant. All of this comes back around to one of the key pillars of Superman, and a part of Lex's plan and the film's story that handles it very well. Superman doesn't like to lie. That's not to say he never does, but he doesn't like doing it. He's a good guy, and lying's just not a stand-up thing to do. The most horrible and cruel thing about this movie, and the one thing that I thought about quite long after, is that truth itself is used against Superman to hurt him. That Kryptonian message for him to take over Earth and rule as a god, that was true. That revelation, that truth that Clark, Kal, and Superman struggles with is blasted across the entire world and used to trap and imprison him, and there's nothing he could do against it. He begs Mr. Terrific to tell him it's fake, but it isn't, and that truth around why he was really sent to Earth does more damage to him than Lex ever did with the Engineer and stupid Ultraman. It's an indictment on the modern world, where words and truth are constantly twisted by everyday people, as well as a horde of online bots paid by private interests and governments to push their points of view. I also think it's a little autobiographical with how James Gunn came to work as CEO of DC, mainly through his firing from Marvel after the truth of some really poor taste jokes were refound. I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about the message and the larger consequences for Krypton and Kryptonian culture, but I'm really interested to see where it goes, especially with a certain major Superman villain. After all this praise, let me give a little poke to the film. It's a little overstuffed. I love the Justice Gang as a concept, and I do think they are needed, but I think they are James Gunn writing himself out of a corner of having to give Superman something to do and palm it off onto several secondary characters. I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but I think it's Gunn working to his strengths in a way that is maybe a little too safe for a film that needed to send a real strong swing, a real big swing. That being said, Guy Gardner is great. Hawkgirl isn't a stupid barista, and if you understand that reference, I feel sorry for you. And Mr. Terrific is as terrific as he should be. Honestly, he stole the show for me. I need at least a TV show, but preferably a solo film where he does all of his super cool stuff. Put him in the Justice League. There isn't a limit on how many people you have to have in the starting roster. We can have the Martian Manhunter, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, a Green Lantern that isn't Guy Gardner, as well as Superman, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific. That sounds amazing. Make it happen. Perfect. Amazing. Of course, the inclusion of the Justice Gang means they need to do something, which means we get that big kaiju fight to set them up, as well as the big border fight at the end. It also means that the villains of the Engineer and Ultraman have to take center stage, as we don't flip between ending the war and Metropolis. Apart from Lex, the villains are probably the biggest weak point. The drunk Russian guy from 2012 who plays the Boravian president is just weird, if not fun, addition to a very complex scheme, whilst the Engineer weirdly writes herself off and Ultraman is a very Marvel-esque cliche that really bogs down the third act. There's not much justice, get it because it's the whole thing I was doing over here, in how they handle the situation. They're not a league yet after all, but it is a fine conclusion that gives these side characters a nice Superman-inspired moment. I think it comes down in the end to one moment. Well, two, but I'm saving that one for the conclusion. This moment is more plot oriented. It focuses on the great power that only a few have, and luckily, they are as alive and kicking in this world as they are in Superman. Superman's motto has evolved over the years. The American way was redesigned to fit a more broader audience, but in a way its spirit lives on. The best parts of American ideology is that together they can build a world that doesn't have to deal with the pressures, judgment, and bigotry of their present. How did the Americans of even only a few decades ago do this? Writing. journalism. All the way back to the Revolutionary War, newspapers and pamphlets and think pieces were crucial. It also required people getting kicked in the nuts and told to fuck off. Those people then were the Brits, God save the king, whereas in Superman those people are billionaires and the power hungry. So it only feels fitting that as Superman and the Justice Gang give those people a good hiding, that the real work, the important work, is being done by a few hard-working, underappreciated and factually conscious journalists. Superman may have stopped the interdimensional rift and kicked himself into a black hole, but it's Lois Lane, Perry White and Jimmy Olsen that took down Lex Luthor to help build that better tomorrow. Oh, and Eve Tessmacher. She was involved as well. It's been hard being a hardcore DC fan. Watching these characters, campy or sometimes silly, be forced to shop at Hot Topic and wear eyeliner like an edgy teenager. In the reaction to the realism of Christopher Nolan, all of DC was transformed to this grey, lifeless blob where nothing mattered and the ethics of saving a life were more important than the life itself. Henry Cavill's Superman would prefer to monologue to Amy Adams' Lois Lane about the nature and history and iconography of the Sibyllum's chest, rather than be a superhero. Darkness was the rule of law, even for characters where their light was the point. This film isn't a rejection of realism, of darkness, but an acceptance that character matters. That Superman is Superman, and Batman is Batman. You shouldn't force Superman into the darkness of Gotham for the same reason you shouldn't shove Batman into a cave full of bats when he was a child. Wait, no. You get what I mean. The core of a character can't change. The story should always challenge it, push it to its limits, but never change that core. And James Gunn shows that he knows this in a single stroke of genius. One of the most powerful scenes put to screen in recent memory. A scene that symbolises and epitomises Superman and his impact in one moment. When everything is on the line, when defeat seems certain and death a guarantee, with the world watching and every character, hero, villain or civilian, is watching powerlessly as a war one side has no chance of surviving is about to erupt. That their last, most desperate act is to raise a single flag with a simple emblem and call out for someone that gives them the one thing they needed. Something that moment gave every character in that scene, every person sitting in that cinema, and something that is at the core of Superman as a character. Hope.